It was April 23, 2025, at Purgatory Chasm State Reservation in Sutton, Massachusetts, a rugged, scenic place known for its dramatic rock formations and narrow, uneven trails. That afternoon, 49-year-old Carolyn Carey Sanger had planned a simple family outing. A devoted mother of 4 from Topsfield, she arrived with 3 of her children and her brother for what was meant to be a joyful hike together in nature. Carey loved the outdoors and had always embraced wellness in every part of her life. After years of working as an oncology nurse, she had recently transitioned into a new chapter, opening her own wellness studio, Balanced Body, in Topsfield, where she practiced massage therapy and Reiki healing. This hike was supposed to be a break, a peaceful few hours with the people she loved most. But at 1:45 p.m., everything changed. A 911 call was placed to Sutton Police. A woman had fallen between 50 and 75 feet into the chasm. That woman was Carey. Rescue crews responded quickly. The chasm, carved deep into solid rock, is a quarter-mile long and surrounded by sheer cliffs and narrow ledges. By the time emergency responders reached her, several nearby hikers, some with medical training, were already attempting to save her. They had witnessed the fall and rushed to help, but her injuries were catastrophic. Carey was pronounced dead at the scene. Authorities confirmed that the fall occurred in full view of her 3 children. In the chaos that followed, they ran to find park rangers who called in state police and rescue teams. Her husband, Michael Sanger, was notified soon after. Investigators determined the fall to be accidental. A family friend, Tim Powley, later said, "It was just a trip, a loss of footing. That part of the trail is especially difficult." Purgatory Chasm, with its sharp drops and exposed rock ledges, has long drawn adventurous hikers. One visitor, Andy Spears, noted, "There are trails above the chasm with dangerous overhangs. If you go too close to the edge to look down, it's risky. It's so sad something like this happened here." Carey had no known health issues. Officials believe a simple misstep on treacherous ground was enough to cause the fatal fall. Even with the fast response, nothing more could be done. News of her passing spread quickly across the Topsfield community. Friends and loved ones described Carey as kind, selfless, and full of light. A GoFundMe campaign organized by family friend Brooke Powley raised over $100,000 in just days. "She was a bright light," Brooke wrote, "a wonderful, selfless mother who raised 4 incredible, respectful, responsible kids." Her husband, Michael, later spoke to the press, wearing one of Carey's shirts. "She was amazing," he said, "the brightness and light on a dark day for a lot of people." The two had met in college and were preparing to celebrate their 20th wedding anniversary. Carey's impact stretched far beyond her family. As a nurse, therapist, and healer, she was someone people trusted in their most vulnerable moments. Friend and colleague Mo Lee Shur remembered her as someone who could light up a room and make you feel safe. She had recently stepped away from nursing to focus fully on her wellness practice, renovating her studio by hand, proud of what she had created. In 2016, Carey and Michael were featured in a local news segment about veterans. Michael, an Iraq War veteran, credited Carey with helping him through his darkest times. Another friend, Catherine Schonfarber, wrote, "Carey was a radiant presence, a healer, a teacher, a friend whose kindness touched countless lives. For the Sanger family and for everyone who knew her, the loss is overwhelming. A place known for its wild beauty became the setting of an unimaginable tragedy." Carey spent her final moments surrounded by nature and the people she loved, and in the days that followed, her family held tightly to memories, to photos, and to the warmth she left behind. In January 2013, Sarai Sierra, a 33-year-old mother of 2 from Staten Island, New York, embarked on her very first solo trip abroad. Fueled by her deep passion for photography, Sarai set her sights on Istanbul, Turkey, a city bursting with culture, history, and architectural splendor. She longed to capture its energy through her lens, turning inspiration into art. For Sarai, this wasn't just a vacation. It was a dream, a personal quest, and a bold adventure into the unknown. Originally, she planned to travel with a friend, but when those plans fell through at the last minute, Sarai chose to go alone. She didn't let fear or uncertainty hold her back. She embraced the opportunity, trusting that the world was as beautiful and open as she hoped to find it. For days, she wandered through ancient alleyways and busy bazaars, photographing domes, minarets, and quiet corners of everyday life. Her camera was her constant companion, her way of seeing the world and sharing it. Throughout her stay in Istanbul, Sarai remained in close contact with her loved ones. She sent messages, video chatted with her children, and posted photos and updates on social media. Her family felt reassured by her frequent communication, by her joy, and by the sense of wonder in her words. She was happy, thriving, doing something just for herself. But on January 21st, the day she was scheduled to fly home, Sarai never arrived at the airport. She didn't board her flight. She didn't call. She simply vanished. Her disappearance triggered immediate alarm. Her husband, Sarai Sierra, and her brother, David Jimenez, flew to Istanbul to search for her. They worked alongside Turkish authorities, distributed missing person flyers, and retraced her steps. Istanbul, which had once been a place of artistic inspiration, was now the epicenter of a desperate search for answers. The investigation gained international attention. Surveillance footage showed Sarai alive on January 21st, captured by security cameras in a food court and walking down a street. She wore the same outfit in which her body would later be discovered. Clues were scarce. Her belongings, passport, clothes, phone charger, and medical cards were still in her rented room, suggesting she hadn't intended to leave permanently. 12 agonizing days passed before the truth was uncovered. On February 2nd, Sarai's body was found near the remnants of the ancient city walls in Istanbul's Sarayburnu district. The area, frequented by tourists during the day, had become the scene of a horrifying crime. Sarai had suffered a fatal blow to the head. A blanket found nearby suggested she had been moved after death. Her family's worst fears had come true. What was supposed to be a personal journey of growth and creativity had ended in a nightmare. Turkish authorities launched a sweeping investigation. They questioned 9 suspects and pored over DNA evidence. Eventually, a breakthrough came. A homeless man named Ziya Tasala was arrested. Under interrogation, he confessed. He admitted to approaching Sarai as she took photos near the city walls. When she resisted his advances, he struck her with a rock. His DNA matched evidence found at the scene. In June 2014, he was convicted of Sarai Sierra's murder and sentenced to life in prison. Her death stunned both Turkey and the United States. Sarai had been a careful traveler, a devoted mother, and a woman simply following her passion. Her murder cast a harsh spotlight on the dangers faced by solo female travelers around the world. Sarai Sierra never made it home, but her story lives on, not just as a tragedy, but as a testament to courage, creativity, and the deep yearning we all share to explore and experience the world. On a chilly December night in 1984, the city of Bhopal, India, became the site of one of the deadliest industrial disasters the world has ever seen. Without warning, a silent, toxic cloud spread through the air, creeping into homes, choking the streets, and shattering thousands of lives in a matter of hours. This was no natural disaster. It was the result of human negligence, corporate cost-cutting, and ignored safety warnings at the Union Carbide India Limited pesticide plant. At the heart of the disaster was methyl isocyanate, MIC, a highly poisonous chemical that leaked from the plant after water accidentally entered one of the storage tanks, triggering a runaway chemical reaction that no one was prepared to stop. By the early hours of December 3rd, Bhopal was blanketed in toxic gas. Families awoke in panic, coughing, gasping for breath, their eyes burning as they stumbled through the darkness, desperate to escape the deadly air. Some never made it out of their homes. Streets filled with people running for their lives, yet there was nowhere to hide from the invisible killer. Thousands perished that night, and in the days, weeks, and years that followed, the death toll climbed to an estimated 15,000 to 20,000. Even worse, over 500,000 people were left injured or permanently disabled, facing lifelong health problems ranging from lung disease and eye damage to neurological disorders and birth defects among future generations. Entire families were shattered, and the city's landscape was forever changed. What makes the Bhopal gas tragedy so haunting is that it was entirely avoidable. Investigations revealed a chilling story of negligence, broken safety systems, ignored warnings, undertrained staff, and a corporate culture that prioritized cost savings over human lives. The plant had become a ticking time bomb, and on that tragic December night it exploded. Experts later found that the warning systems that might have alerted the community were either turned off or non-functional. The company had been warned before about potential hazards but repeatedly failed to take corrective action. It was not just an accident. It was the result of years of overlooked risks. In the aftermath, survivors fought not just to recover, but for justice. Union Carbide's then CEO, Warren Anderson, was charged but never brought to trial in India, shielded by international legal and political obstacles. The company settled out of court, but many survivors and activists saw the compensation as a fraction of what was owed, especially as the factory site remained contaminated for decades, continuing to poison the land and water around Bhopal. Entire communities still live with the environmental and health fallout, and cleanup efforts have been painfully slow, leaving toxic chemicals seeping into groundwater to this day. The Bhopal disaster became a global wake-up call, a grim reminder of what can happen when powerful corporations operate without sufficient oversight and accountability, especially in vulnerable communities. It raised urgent, still relevant points: how we hold multinational companies accountable, how we protect human lives from industrial risks, and how we make sure a tragedy like Bhopal never happens again. The memory of Bhopal stands not only as a symbol of loss, but as a call to action, urging the world to prioritize human safety over profit, and to ensure that such a devastating failure is never repeated. It was October 19, 1968, when a peaceful day in Yosemite National Park turned grim. A group of hikers stumbled upon a horrifying sight near the base of Nevada Fall. 200 feet downstream from the roaring 594-foot drop lay the lifeless body of 24-year-old Evelyn Roseman from San Francisco. She had gone hiking alone 3 days earlier and never came back. Evelyn was known to be fiercely independent. She worked as a masseuse in Yosemite during the tourist season and loved exploring nature by herself. That October day had typical conditions: cool weather and low river flow, nothing that would suggest danger. So when she vanished, the theory that she'd been swept away by strong currents didn't make much sense. But the circumstances surrounding Evelyn's death weren't just tragic, they were deeply disturbing. Her corduroy pants were ripped and pulled down to her ankles. Her sweater had been pulled over her head, and another black sweater was found nearby. Oddly, she wasn't wearing any undergarments. Stranger still, her purse, containing all her belongings, was found sitting untouched on a footbridge above the waterfall, far from where her body was found. And her body wasn't where it should have been either. If she had fallen, investigators expected to find her directly below the waterfall. Instead, she was 200 feet downstream. This alone raised red flags. The idea that she jumped or even slipped was ruled out pretty quickly. Even if she had, the impact point just didn't line up. Then came the autopsy, which only deepened the mystery. Evelyn had died from a massive head injury consistent with a fall from a great height. Shockingly, pieces of her brain tissue were found 50 feet away, closer to the waterfall's center. Every single bone in her body was broken, which matched the force of the fall, but oddly, her skin was mostly intact. In falls, this severe torn skin and shredded clothing are common. Not here. Even worse, signs of post-mortem sexual assault were discovered, later confirmed in a case review. At that point, it was clear Evelyn hadn't simply fallen. Someone had caused her death, either by pushing her or by moving her body afterward. Investigators even considered the unsettling idea that someone had somehow launched her. The theory that an animal dragged her didn't hold up. No bite marks, claw injuries, or animal tracks were found. Yet, despite the suspicious evidence, Evelyn's case was handled unusually quietly. Mariposa County officials suggested a coroner's jury might be called, but nothing more was ever said. The FBI got involved, but their files remained sealed. Technically, the case is still open, leaving only scattered media reports and books to piece together the truth. In 2019, during a paranormal conference, one speaker suggested Evelyn's death might have involved a cryptid, but a woman in the audience cut in, pointing to the obvious. There was plenty of evidence of human violence, no monsters required. One book added more grim details, including that Evelyn had worked as a topless waitress and masseuse, details that, sadly, might have shaped how her case was viewed at the time. In the end, the big questions remain: why move her body? Why risk being seen? And most importantly, who did it? Over 50 years later, Evelyn's death still casts a shadow over Yosemite. Someone caused it, and whoever they were never caught. Eva Liu, a bright 21-year-old from Naperville, Illinois, had just wrapped up an intense academic journey. She'd earned both her bachelor's and master's degrees in computer science from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and she was on the cusp of beginning a promising new chapter, her dream job as a software engineer at Microsoft. But before diving into the working world, Eva wanted one last carefree adventure, a chance to breathe, to explore, to celebrate. On June 14, 2023, she set out on a trip to Germany with her close friend and fellow classmate, Kelsey Chang. One of the highlights, a hike to the breathtaking Neuschwanstein castle in Bavaria, a fairy tale fortress nestled in the Alps and one of Germany's most iconic landmarks. That day, under a clear blue sky, the two friends made their way toward the Marienbrücke Bridge, a narrow footbridge suspended 300 feet above a gorge. From there, visitors can take in panoramic views of the majestic castle and the surrounding mountains. It was supposed to be a day filled with awe and joy, but it turned into something unimaginably dark. While hiking, the two women met another traveler, 30-year-old Troy Philip Bowling, an American who struck up friendly conversation. He seemed harmless enough, knowledgeable about the area, and even suggested they follow a less traveled path for an even better view, a hidden spot that promised picture-perfect selfies. Trusting his suggestion, Eva and Kelsey agreed. But as they ventured farther from the main trail, things began to feel off. The path grew more secluded, and the air heavier with unease. And then, everything changed. Without warning, Bohing turned violent. He shoved Eva to the ground and tried to undress her, his intention clear and horrifying. Kelsey, seeing her friend in danger, immediately jumped in to help. In the chaos that followed, Bowling overpowered her, choking her until she lost consciousness, then pushing her down a steep 50-meter slope. Kelsey survived the fall, sustaining serious injuries, but she was alive. Bowling then returned to Eva. He strangled her until she passed out, sexually assaulted her, and coldly pushed her over the edge. Her body, already battered from the attack, could not survive the fall. The vibrant young woman full of promise and excitement for the future was gone. Rescue teams arrived on the scene and found Kelsey injured but responsive. Eva, in critical condition, was airlifted to a hospital, but tragically, she died overnight from her injuries. What should have been a joyful memory became a nightmare etched in horror. Bowling tried to flee but was arrested shortly after. His trial revealed even more disturbing details. Investigators found child sexual abuse material on his devices, and the court confirmed that neither Eva nor Kelsey had known him before that fateful encounter. Bowling pled guilty to murder and sexual assault. His lawyer claimed the attack was spontaneous and that Bowling was ashamed of his actions, but the charges, including murder, attempted murder, and possession of child abuse imagery, left little room for leniency. In Germany, a murder conviction can mean life in prison, and few would argue he deserves anything less. This tragic story is a chilling reminder. Even the most picturesque destinations can hide unthinkable dangers. Throughout history, workplaces have witnessed shocking and disturbing deaths that go far beyond typical accidents. From bizarre factory mishaps to horrifying chemical disasters, these tragedies remind us how dangerous some jobs can be. Here's a look at some of the most unsettling and unforgettable workplace deaths of all time. The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire of 1911 is one of the most haunting and pivotal tragedies in American labor history, a moment that forced the nation to confront the brutal realities faced by industrial workers. On March 25, 1911, in the heart of Manhattan's Greenwich Village, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory was bustling with about 500 workers, mostly young immigrant women, many of them just 16 years old teenagers, some as young as 14. They were crammed into crowded workrooms, stitching away at shirtwaists, the fashionable blouses of the day, under grueling and exhausting conditions. Long hours, low pay, little ventilation, and barely any safety measures were the daily reality for these workers who were simply trying to earn enough to survive. That afternoon, disaster struck in the most devastating way. A small fire, likely caused by a discarded match or cigarette, ignited a pile of fabric scraps on the 8th floor. Highly flammable materials like wooden tables, paper patterns, and fabric piled high, the fire spread with terrifying speed. Workers panicked as thick black smoke filled the air. They tried to reach the exits, but they were met with an unimaginable horror. The doors were locked. The owners, Isaac Harris and Max Blanc, had kept the doors chained shut to prevent workers from sneaking out for breaks or stealing materials, a sadly common and dangerous practice in sweatshops at the time. As the flames roared and the heat became unbearable, many workers found themselves with no way out. The fire escapes were either too narrow, poorly constructed, or already collapsing under the weight of desperate workers trying to flee. Some tried to cram into the building's 2 small elevators, while others rushed to the stairwells only to be overtaken by smoke and fire. Then came the most heartbreaking and unforgettable scene. As crowds gathered helplessly in the streets below, dozens of young women appeared at the windows, realizing there was no escape. One by one, they began to jump, leaping from the 9th floor in a desperate attempt to avoid the flames. They fell to their deaths right before the eyes of horrified onlookers who could do nothing but watch. By the time the fire was extinguished, 146 workers were dead. Families were left devastated. The city was shaken to its core, and the public was outraged. Newspapers splashed the gruesome details across their front pages, reporting on the terrible conditions that had led to such an unimaginable loss of life. Citizens demanded justice, and Harris and Blanc were brought to trial. Yet, despite overwhelming evidence of their negligence and the clear disregard for worker safety, the factory owners were acquitted of manslaughter. They did eventually pay small compensation settlements to the victims' families, but it was little comfort after such a massive loss. Still, the impact of the Triangle Fire could not be ignored. It became a powerful rallying cry for labor reform. Massive protests and demonstrations swept through New York, led by groups like the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, which had long been fighting for better working conditions. Politicians, activists, and even wealthy socialites joined the push for reform, working together to pass new laws on fire safety, building codes, and labor protections. Things like mandatory fire drills, unlocked exit doors, better fire escapes, and sprinkler systems became standard requirements. It was a hard-earned and deeply painful turning point, a moment in history that changed the way the nation thought about worker rights and workplace safety. Even today, more than a century later, the memory of the Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire lingers. It stands as a sobering reminder of what can happen when profit is valued over people, when workers' voices are ignored, and when basic safety measures are neglected. The reforms that followed have saved countless lives since then, but the tragedy itself remains a heartbreaking chapter in the story of American labor, one that should never be forgotten. It was November 22, 2020, high in the Pyrenees Mountains along the French-Spanish border, when 37-year-old British hiker Esther Dingley set out on what would be her final trek. An experienced solo adventurer, Esther had spent years traveling Europe in a camper van with her longtime partner, Dan Colgate, documenting their life together on a travel blog. This time, she was hiking alone. That afternoon, she summited Pic de Sauvegarde, a 737-meter peak, and sent Dan a selfie via WhatsApp around 4 p.m. They shared a brief 90-second video call, the last time anyone would hear from her. Esther planned to spend the night at Refuge de Venasque, a small unmanned mountain shelter nearby. Her route, crossing briefly into France before looping back into Spain, was well within her capabilities. Her last message read, "Might dip into France, hoping Refuge Venasque has a winter room. Keep you posted when can. Love you X." She never sent another message. 3 days later, on November 25th, Dan reported her missing. He had been house-sitting just 100 miles away. Authorities from both France and Spain launched a joint search effort across nearly 700 square miles. Drones, helicopters, and alpine rescue teams combed the rugged terrain, but found no sign of Esther. As December brought worsening snowstorms, the official search was suspended until spring. Dan stayed behind, continuing to search whenever weather allowed. He had mapped her planned route in a detailed 23-page document, a route she had personally confirmed before setting out. Still, there were no answers. By February 2021, Dan voiced growing concerns that Esther may have encountered someone, possibly hunters, but authorities continued to treat the case as a tragic accident. When spring arrived and the snow began to melt, the search resumed. On July 23, 2021, a group of mountain runners made a grim discovery near Port de la Glaire, not far from Esther's intended path, a fragment of a human skull. DNA confirmed it was hers. Then, on August 9th, Dan made the heartbreaking discovery himself. After narrowing his search, he found Esther's body about 400 meters below the summit of Pic de la Glaire. Her backpack, hiking shoes, and phone were nearby, partially concealed by snow and months of exposure. Her yellow tent was never found. Esther's hiking shoes showed signs of heavy wear. Although she had packed Kula microspikes, traction gear for icy terrain, she hadn't been wearing them. An autopsy later confirmed that she likely died instantly after falling roughly 100 feet from a rocky ridge. The injuries pointed to a high-impact fall, possibly caused by slipping on ice made worse by worn soles. Her phone held no further clues beyond that final video call. The spot where she fell was remote and difficult to reach, contributing to the months-long delay in locating her. There were no signs of foul play. Investigators concluded that Esther was following her planned route when she slipped. Despite her experience and careful preparation, the terrain had proven treacherous and unforgiving. In a joint statement, Dan and Esther's mother thanked the search teams and everyone who had supported them during the long months of uncertainty. They shared their sorrow, now knowing for certain that Esther would not be coming home. Esther Dingley had prepared for this journey with thought and care. But in the mountains, even the most seasoned hikers can face dangers beyond their control. Her final adventure was one she embraced fully, but nature, as always, had the final word. On October 5, 2022, 24-year-old Sebastian Mejia turned on a water heater in his Airbnb rental in Rio de Janeiro. He was simply trying to enjoy a warm shower after a long day. What he didn't know, what no guest could have anticipated, was that this ordinary act would end his life. Within minutes, a silent, invisible killer, carbon monoxide, filled the room. And just like that, a life filled with brilliance, purpose, and promise was stolen. Born on May 9, 1998 in Miami, Florida, Sebastian was the son of Rosa Elena Martinez Bettis and Jimmy Mejia Londoño, both immigrants from Colombia. He grew up in Miramar, where his sharp intellect and deep curiosity were evident early on. By the time he graduated summa cum laude from Palmetto Ridge High School in 2016, it was clear that Sebastian was destined for big things. He went on to attend Florida State University, where he earned a dual bachelor's degree in Latin American and Caribbean Studies and International Affairs, with a minor in Portuguese. Again, he graduated summa cum laude in May 2020, a testament to his academic drive and dedication. But Sebastian wasn't just about the books. He poured his heart into everything he did. Throughout college, he served as an English instructor and child care provider in Managua, Nicaragua, while also tutoring and teaching in Tallahassee and Naples, Florida. He volunteered with the Tallahassee Bail Fund and the Frenchtown Urban Farm. He didn't just study his community, he served it. At FSU, he also stepped up as a leader, acting as director and event coordinator for the Coalition for Latinx Studies. Sebastian was passionate about his heritage. He traced his roots to the Muisca and Panch peoples and committed himself to understanding their history and advocating for their recognition as indigenous communities in Colombia. His research took him from dusty archives to remote villages, from the Amazon to the Andean highlands. His work wasn't confined to classrooms. It lived in the communities he visited and the people he met. In spring 2021, he earned a departmental fellowship to New York University. There, he began his master's degree at the Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies, diving deep into topics like indigeneity, capitalism, and social movements in Brazil and Colombia. By the fall, he was in Rio de Janeiro, pursuing a prestigious Fulbright Research Fellowship, collaborating with historians at the Federal University of Rio. Then came that tragic October day. In his Airbnb bathroom, a malfunctioning gas water heater began leaking carbon monoxide, a colorless, odorless gas. The exhaust duct was damaged and incorrectly installed. The bathroom had no ventilation, no escape for the fumes, and worst of all, no carbon monoxide detector. By the time anyone realized something was wrong, it was too late. Sebastian's body was discovered the next day. A police investigation confirmed what experts dread. The water heater installation violated building codes. The exhaust system was faulty. It was an accident waiting to happen, one that could have been prevented with a single carbon monoxide detector. Despite marketing itself as a company committed to safety, Airbnb doesn't require hosts to install carbon monoxide alarms. Even after Sebastian's death, the company never reached out to his grieving family. In June 2023, his parents filed a lawsuit against Airbnb in California State Court, not just for justice, but in hopes of preventing another tragedy like this. But no legal victory can undo what was lost. No settlement can replace a son, a scholar, a future changemaker. Sebastian Mahia was more than a victim of a faulty heater. He was a rising star, a bridge between cultures, a champion of justice. His life mattered, and it should never have ended like this. On March 11, 2011, Japan faced one of the most devastating natural disasters in its history, a massive earthquake, followed by a powerful tsunami that triggered a nuclear crisis with far-reaching consequences. This event, known as the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster, dramatically changed how the world viewed nuclear power and safety. It all began with the Great East Japan earthquake, a staggering magnitude 9.0 quake, which struck off the northeastern coast of Honshu, Japan's main island. The earthquake alone caused significant damage, but the real devastation came moments later when a towering tsunami, with waves reaching heights of up to 15 meters, around 50 feet, swept over the coastline. This deadly combination overwhelmed the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, located near the coast in Fukushima Prefecture. Fukushima Daiichi was a complex of 6 boiling water reactors designed to provide electricity safely and efficiently. Under normal conditions, these reactors rely on constant cooling systems to prevent overheating of the nuclear fuel rods, which generate heat through nuclear fission. However, when the tsunami struck, it knocked out the plant's power supply, including critical backup diesel generators that powered the cooling systems. Without electricity to operate pumps and fans, the reactors began to overheat. This loss of cooling caused the fuel rods in 3 reactors to melt partially, a process known as a meltdown. As temperatures soared, hydrogen gas built up inside the reactor buildings, eventually leading to explosions that damaged the structures and released radioactive materials into the environment. The contamination spread through air, water, and soil, raising serious concerns about health and environmental safety. The Japanese government quickly ordered evacuations in a roughly 20-kilometer radius around the plant, relocating over 100,000 people to safer areas. The evacuation was a massive logistical challenge, separating families and uprooting communities. Many residents still face long-term displacement, as large areas remain contaminated and unsafe for habitation. Globally, the disaster sparked intense debate over nuclear power's risks and benefits. While nuclear energy offers a low-carbon alternative to fossil fuels, Fukushima exposed vulnerabilities in reactor design and emergency preparedness. Countries around the world reassessed their nuclear programs. Some, like Germany, accelerated plans to phase out nuclear power, while others invested heavily in safety upgrades and alternative energy sources. The cleanup and decommissioning of Fukushima Daiichi is an ongoing, complex process expected to take decades. It involves removing highly radioactive fuel, managing contaminated water, and dismantling damaged reactors, all under challenging conditions. Advanced technologies, including remote-controlled robots and specialized containment systems, are being used to reduce risks to workers and the environment. Despite the severity of the disaster, Fukushima also led to improvements in nuclear safety regulations globally. Japan, for example, established the Nuclear Regulation Authority, NRA, a stricter oversight body tasked with enforcing enhanced safety standards. New protocols for natural disaster preparedness, emergency response, and public communication have been implemented. Fukushima's legacy is a sobering reminder of the power of nature and the importance of respecting it with robust safety measures. It highlights the delicate balance between harnessing nuclear energy's benefits and managing its risks responsibly. The disaster also accelerated interest and investment in renewable energy technologies like solar and wind power, seen as safer and more sustainable options. In conclusion, the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster was a pivotal moment in modern history. It was born from a natural catastrophe but magnified by technological failures. Its impacts, social, environmental, and political, continue to influence energy policy and safety practices worldwide. The disaster underscores the need for vigilance, innovation, and a commitment to protecting both people and the planet as we move forward in the complex world of energy production. It was September 1st, 1974, when the Cowden family set off for what was supposed to be a quiet, last-minute camping trip in Oregon's Siskiyou Mountains. Richard Cowden, a 28-year-old logging truck driver, had planned to spend the weekend working on his driveway. But when his truck broke down, he and his wife Belinda, just 22, packed up their two kids, 5-year-old David and 5-month-old Melissa, along with their basset hound, Droopy, and headed for the woods instead. The Cowdens were a regular outdoorsy family from White City, Oregon, and their chosen spot, Carberry Creek in the Rogue River Siskiyou National Forest, seemed peaceful. That morning, Richard and little David were seen buying milk at a general store in the now-gone town of Copper around 9 a.m. It was the last time anyone would see the family alive. When the Cowdens didn't show up for dinner that night at Belinda's mother's house, she drove to the campsite, and instantly she knew something was wrong. The truck was parked as if nothing was amiss. Keys lay on the picnic table. Belinda's purse and the baby's diaper bag were left out. The camp stove was fully set up, and the milk, cold and unopened, was still sitting there. Even Richard's wallet and Belinda's cigarettes were untouched. The only thing missing? Their swimsuits. After waiting an hour, she called the police. Authorities arrived that night, and right away the scene felt off. One trooper later said the whole place felt spooky. The next morning, Droopy, the family dog, was found alone, scratching at the general store's door, dirty but alive. It only deepened the mystery. A massive search followed. Hundreds of volunteers, police, forest rangers, and even the National Guard scoured the rugged terrain. Helicopters with infrared sensors scanned from above. Over 25 miles were searched, but there was no trace of the family. Robbery was ruled out, so was drowning or a voluntary disappearance. Everything valuable was left behind, and Richard made enough to support them. Something terrible had happened, but no one could figure out what. Then, 7 months later, on April 12, 1975, two gold prospectors stumbled upon a shallow cave about 7 miles from the campsite. Inside, behind a barrier of carefully placed rocks, were the remains of Belinda, David, and baby Melissa. Just outside the cave, tied to a nearby tree, was Richard. Dental records confirmed the worst. The autopsies were horrifying. Belinda and David had been shot with a .22 caliber rifle. Melissa had been beaten to death. Richard's cause of death couldn't be determined, but it was clear the family had been murdered. Oddly, a search volunteer swore the cave had been empty during earlier searches, suggesting the killer may have moved the bodies. A witness from Los Angeles recalled seeing a suspicious group, a man, a woman, and another man in a pickup near the Cowdens' camp. Investigators believed it could have been Dwayne Lee Little, a convicted murderer recently paroled, who was known to be in the area. His girlfriend later confirmed he owned a .22 rifle, and a former cellmate claimed he had confessed. Still, there wasn't enough evidence to charge him. Little is now serving 3 life sentences for another violent attack. But he's never spoken a word about the Cowden case, and to this day, the disappearance and murder of this innocent family remains one of Oregon's darkest, most chilling mysteries. The forest has long buried the truth, and their killer still walks free.
Catherine Chappell had what many would call a dream career. A brilliant visual effects editor, her work lit up the screens of millions. She helped shape the world of Game of Thrones, even earning a Primetime Emmy for for her efforts on the epic Season 4 finale, The Children. Born in December 1985 in Westchester County, New York, Catherine's path took her from Hofstra University in Long Island to the vibrant entertainment world of Vancouver. She left her mark on blockbusters like Captain America, The Winter Soldier, and Divergent. Her talent was unmistakable, and her future in the industry was incredibly bright. But beyond the red carpets and computer screens, Catherine had another passion: wildlife conservation. In 2015, she traveled to South Africa, not for work, but to support Wildlife ACT, a conservation charity dedicated to protecting endangered species. Her mission was heartfelt: raise funds, raise awareness, and do something meaningful outside the realm of Hollywood. On June 1, 2015, Catherine found herself in Johannesburg's famous Lion Park, a popular destination where visitors could get up close with Africa's most majestic predators. She was accompanied by a guide from Calabash Tours, and the day was shaping up to be unforgettable for all the right reasons. The sun was out, the landscape was stunning, and the lions were in view. But in one fatal moment, the day took a horrifying turn. As their vehicle approached a group of lions, Catherine did what many tourists would be tempted to do. She opened her window to snap a photo. It seemed harmless, a quick shot of the wild. But that small decision unleashed a tragedy. Without warning, a lioness lunged through the open window. The attack was swift, brutal, and shocking. Her guide, Pierre Potgieter, fought back with everything he had, throwing punches at the lioness in a desperate attempt to save Catherine. Witnesses say the lion retreated after the initial strike, blood dripping from her mouth and paws. But the horror wasn't over. The lioness returned, launching a second, even more devastating assault. Catherine was torn apart. Her face and chest were brutally mauled. The scene was beyond anything anyone could have imagined. Pierre's heroic efforts came at a cost. He suffered a heart attack from the stress and trauma and was hospitalized shortly after. An eyewitness, Ben Genter, who was in the car behind them, captured a photo of the lioness just before the attack, never realizing the nightmare about to unfold. The aftermath sent shockwaves through the public. How could something like this happen, especially with a guide present? Lion Park officials insisted that all visitors were repeatedly warned to keep their windows closed at all times. It was a strict rule designed for everyone's safety, but in that fleeting moment, one open window changed everything. Catherine's family and boyfriend were devastated. At her memorial, her sister Jennifer described her as fearless, someone who embraced life without hesitation. Her boyfriend recalled warning her to be cautious, reminding her she was still a city girl in unfamiliar territory. Catherine Chappelle's tragic end serves as a gut-wrenching reminder. Even the most beautiful places on Earth can turn deadly in an instant. One moment of wonder, one misstep, and a life full of promise was gone forever. On December 6, 1917, Halifax, Nova Scotia, was a busy and crucial port city during World War I. Ships carrying troops, supplies, and dangerous cargo arrived and departed constantly. Among these vessels was the French ship SS Mont Blanc, which was loaded with a massive and highly explosive cargo, including TNT, picric acid, benzol, and gun cotton. This made the ship a floating bomb in the harbor, a fact known only to a handful of people at the time. At the same moment, the Norwegian relief ship SS Imo was trying to leave the port, carrying supplies for Belgium. Due to a series of miscommunications, navigational errors, and some strict maritime rules, the two ships ended up on a collision course in the Narrows, the narrowest and most dangerous part of Halifax Harbour. The collision itself did not cause much damage initially, but it ruptured barrels of benzol, a highly flammable liquid, on the Mont Blanc's deck. This quickly ignited a fire on the ship's cargo hold. The crew aboard the Mont Blanc realized the extreme danger of their situation immediately and abandoned ship. They rowed away as fast as they could, leaving the burning ship drifting toward the shore. Unfortunately, the people in Halifax had no idea what the Mont Blanc was carrying. When the fire started, many curious residents, workers, and dock hands gathered near the waterfront or stood at their windows to watch the burning ship. They saw the thick black smoke and the flames licking higher and higher, but no one understood that this was a ticking time bomb heading straight toward the city. Then, at 9:04 a.m., about 20 minutes after the collision, the Mont Blanc exploded. The blast was one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in history, releasing the energy equivalent of nearly 3,000 tons of TNT. The shockwave tore through the city, destroying buildings, shattering windows miles away, and hurling debris like deadly missiles into the air. The force was so powerful it created a tsunami in the harbor, washing away docks, boats, and anything else in its path along the waterfront. The human toll was devastating. Over 2,000 people lost their lives, and around 9,000 more were seriously injured. The blast caused horrific injuries. Burns, broken bones, and blindness were common. Many victims were people who had been standing at their windows or near the harbor watching the fire, completely unaware of the danger they were in. The explosion leveled entire neighborhoods, leaving thousands homeless just days before Christmas. As if the explosion and destruction weren't enough, the very next day, Halifax was hit by a severe blizzard. The sudden snowstorm buried the devastated city under a thick blanket of snow and ice, making rescue efforts even more challenging. Medical staff and volunteers worked around the clock to care for the injured, despite freezing temperatures and limited supplies. Emergency hospitals overflowed with patients, many of whom had suffered serious injuries. Families frantically searched the rubble for missing loved ones while battling the cold and snow. The blizzard added another layer of hardship to an already unimaginable tragedy. Despite the destruction, loss, and heartbreak, the people of Halifax showed remarkable resilience and determination. The community came together to support one another, and aid arrived quickly from across Canada and from Boston in the United States, which sent supplies, medical help, and funds to assist the recovery. Volunteers, workers, and soldiers joined forces to clear debris, rebuild homes, and restore essential services. The city's recovery was slow and difficult, but it demonstrated the strength and spirit of the people who refused to be defeated by disaster.
It was March 23, 2025, on the lush and remote Makaleha Falls Trail in Kauai, Hawaii, when 26-year-old Gianna Bozzetta reached the place she'd dreamed about for years. A pastry chef from Oceanside, California, Gianna was hiking with her boyfriend, Connor Quinton, on what was supposed to be a peaceful, unforgettable adventure. That morning, she told Connor he had made her dream come true. Gianna wasn't your average hiker. She was the executive pastry chef at June Jolie, a Michelin-starred restaurant in Carlsbad, where she'd worked for 4 years. Her team described her as humble, fiercely hard-working, and incredibly gifted. She was known for her sharp wit, deep love for animals, and generous spirit, often volunteering at shelters and always putting others first. That day had started quietly. Gianna and Connor stood in a shallow pool at the base of the falls, taking in the calm beauty of the jungle around them. Then, out of nowhere, a loud crack echoed across the cliffs. Connor glanced up, trying to locate the source. Moments later, a boulder broke loose from high above, massive, unstoppable. Before they could react, it struck Gianna directly in the head. She collapsed into the water. Connor rushed to pull her out. She was unconscious but still breathing, bleeding heavily. With no cell signal in the remote area, he made a split-second decision. He ran. For 3 grueling miles, he pushed through rugged terrain, thick brush, and over rocks, desperate to find help. When he finally reached a spot with reception, he called emergency services. Rescue crews moved fast. They reached Gianna, stabilized her, and airlifted her to Wilcox Memorial Hospital before transferring her to Queens Medical Center in Honolulu. Her parents, Katie and Salazetta, immediately flew to Hawaii. They made it just in time to be by her side. Gianna passed away the next day. Her loss was a crushing blow, but her family found comfort knowing that her final hours were spent in a place of pure beauty with the person she loved most. Her mother later shared that Gianna had felt completely happy and at peace before the accident, a moment of true joy. Back in Carlsbad, the news hit hard. At June Jolie, her absence left a hole no one could fill. Restaurant owner John Resnick called the loss paralyzing. Co-workers remembered Gianna as a quiet force of nature, humble, driven, always pushing to improve, always lifting up those around her. Gianna's passion for baking started early. By 12, she was helping her mom with a floral and events business. By 17, she was juggling multiple jobs. After high school, she studied at the Culinary Institute of America in Napa, trained at Michelin-starred restaurants like Spago and Patina, and returned home to build a career filled with creativity and purpose. Alongside her restaurant work, she ran a thriving private cake business known for natural ingredients, vibrant colors, and delicate balance. After her passing, June Jolie hosted a sold-out benefit dinner on April 7th to help her family. A fundraiser organized by family friend Carly W. quickly gained momentum, raising over $40,000 in just a few days toward a $225,000 goal. The support came from across the country. Gianna was remembered as someone who radiated quiet strength, always checking in on friends, always giving more than she took. Her family expressed deep thanks to the first responders and praised Connor's courage for never giving up. Gianna Buzetta wasn't just a chef. She was a dreamer, a giver, a force of light, and in her final moments, she was exactly where she had always wanted to be, living her dream.
In 2017, Jay Austen and Lauren Giagagan made a bold decision, one that most people only dream about. Both 29 years old and living in Washington, D.C., they left behind stable, respectable careers. Jay at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and Lauren as a senior admissions officer at Georgetown University. Why? To chase a dream. To bike across the world, documenting the kindness of strangers and the beauty of humanity along the way. Their blog quickly became a hit with readers, full of vivid stories and stunning photos from their journey. They started in South Africa, pedaling through sweeping landscapes and vibrant communities. From there, they cycled across Morocco, absorbing the culture and navigating the rugged Casablanca mountains. It wasn't just about sightseeing. They wanted to live intentionally, to prove that the world is more kind than cruel. And for a while, it was. Time and time again, they were met with warmth, hospitality, and selfless acts from complete strangers. In their writing, they reflected on the goodness of people and how fear too often distorts our view of the world. One blog post stood out, an optimistic Q&A where they answered questions about the dangers of global cycling. Relatively speaking, bike touring is really safe, they wrote. The biggest danger is cars, not people. That entry would later haunt their readers. On July 29, 2018, Jay and Lauren were cycling through Tajikistan, a country known for its breathtaking mountain scenery and ancient Silk Road history. They were joined by two other cyclists, one Swiss and one Dutch. Together, the group was riding about 60 miles south of the capital, Dushanbe. Then, the unthinkable happened. A sedan sped toward them, suddenly veering off the road and slamming into the group. The impact was catastrophic, but the horror didn't stop there. The car's occupants, 5 men, got out, armed with knives, and brutally attacked the injured cyclists. It was a calculated ambush. Jay and Lauren were killed in the attack, as were their fellow cyclists. The suspects fled the scene in their blood-soaked vehicle, heading toward the Afghanistan border. But their escape didn't go unnoticed. Villagers in the remote town of Tutbo spotted the damaged car and grew suspicious. When the men ditched the vehicle, locals alerted the authorities and even followed the attackers on foot to ensure they didn't vanish into the wilderness. Soon, law enforcement caught up. One assailant was killed after resisting arrest. The next day, 3 more were found and shot during a confrontation. The final suspect, Hussein Abdusamadov, was captured alive. He was later revealed to be the group's ringleader. What came next was even more chilling. A video surfaced, recorded before the attack, in which the men pledged allegiance to ISIS. Abdusamadov showed no remorse during interrogation. His trial, held behind closed doors, ended with the harshest penalty under Tajik law: life imprisonment. Jay and Lauren's story is heartbreaking. 2 idealistic, kind-hearted people set out to prove that the world is filled with goodness, and for the most part, it was. But their journey ended in unspeakable violence, a tragic reminder that even the most inspiring adventures can carry unimaginable risks. Still, their story endures, not because of how it ended, but because of how bravely it began. On July 6, 1988, the Piper Alpha oil platform, located about 120 miles northeast of Aberdeen in the North Sea, was operating as one of the world's most productive offshore oil rigs. Designed to withstand harsh conditions, It was a massive structure extracting oil and gas beneath the ocean floor, a technological marvel and a source of livelihoods for hundreds of workers. But on that fateful summer day, everything changed in a devastating matter of minutes. The disaster began with routine maintenance on a gas compressor pump. Earlier, the pump had been taken offline for repairs, and a critical safety valve was removed for maintenance. Unfortunately, the system's communication broke down. Those restarting the pump were unaware that the safety valve had not been replaced. This error allowed highly flammable gas to leak unchecked into the platform. When the pump was turned back on, the leaking gas found an ignition source, causing a massive explosion. This initial blast was only the beginning. The explosion damaged the rig's safety systems, including the firewalls and emergency shutdown procedures, and it ruptured gas lines that led to further blasts. Fires quickly spread across the platform, fueled by oil and gas, reaching temperatures that melted steel beams and destroyed escape routes. The scale of the disaster was overwhelming. Emergency systems failed to control the fire or assist evacuation effectively. Crew members faced terrifying conditions as smoke and flames engulfed the rig. Rescue efforts were hindered by the severity of the blaze and the remote location. Helicopters and lifeboats tried to save as many as they could, but in the end, 167 men lost their lives out of the 226 on board. It remains the deadliest offshore oil disaster in history. In the wake of the tragedy, a public inquiry was established, led by Lord Cullen. The Cullen inquiry revealed that the disaster was not simply an accident, but the result of a series of human errors, procedural failures, and inadequate safety culture. A critical failure in communication meant the maintenance team's warnings were not properly conveyed to operations personnel. Key safety equipment was missing or not functioning as intended. Emergency procedures were unclear, and personnel were insufficiently trained for such a catastrophic event. One of the most important findings was that safety had not been fully integrated into every level of the rig's operation. The inquiry highlighted how complex offshore environments require clear communication, rigorous maintenance practices, and comprehensive emergency preparedness. Piper Alpha showed that technical advances alone are not enough to prevent disaster. Safety depends on people, processes, and culture working flawlessly together. The aftermath of Piper Alpha led to significant reforms in offshore safety regulations around the world. The oil industry adopted stricter standards for equipment testing, maintenance, and emergency response. Safety management systems became mandatory, designed to identify risks proactively and ensure everyone knows their roles in a crisis. The tragedy served as a painful but necessary wake-up call that saved countless lives in the years since. Piper Alpha remains a solemn reminder of the dangers inherent in extracting natural resources from challenging environments. While the platform was destroyed and hundreds of lives lost, the lessons learned have transformed offshore safety. The disaster taught the industry that neglecting communication and safety procedures can have catastrophic consequences.